Hello, welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq for December 22nd, 2016. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today we're joined by John Hogoboom. John, you're a lead security analyst on our team, and welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
You always got that.
Do I?
I don't know what it is. Okay, and Stan Nurilov, welcome back.
Thanks,
Glad to
Brian.
have you here. And you're one of our lead security analysts as well, though I guess you're a principal security analyst and with
same
a
thing to me.
specialization of malware reverse engineering. And
Yes.
You usually have an interesting discussion about something you've torn apart before. So
Yeah, so I've been spending a lot of time on the Mirai, as has everybody else. Of course, it's always nice when the source code is released. You don't have to do quite as much low-level reverse engineering. But it's also nice because you get to check your work. And it's rare that you get to do that in reverse engineering. So I'm doing pretty well in that regard. I give myself an A+.
Okay, I've got a feeling we're going to be talking about that a little bit here at some point. So, all right, good. And I'm Brian Rexroad, and then I'm a pointy-haired manager. And anybody that's a Dilbert fan is probably quite acutely aware of what that means. In any case, let's go. And what we're going to do today is we're going to review. We had a program at the end of 2015 where we were making our predictions for 2016, and Manny Ortiz was on the program, Matt Kaiser was on the program, and I was on the program, and so we each had our own little predictions here. So what we're going to do is kind of go back and review those, and we'll, kind of give each other some grades on it. And not to worry, I'm not going to.
Oh, we're not graded. We didn't have no predictions
no
last.
retribution for if I get a bad grade here. So there's no penalty for if I get a bad grade. So first of all, Manny had a forecast for 2016, and he was predicting an increase in cloud compromises. And so, John, I'll go to you first. And what do you think about that? What's been taking place over the last year that?
Well, I don't know if there's been any notable media reports of cloud compromises, but I think in general, the cloud has become an attractive platform for botnet operators, and we know that there have been compromises in cloud platforms. So, certain companies are doing better jobs at securing and making sure these environments stay safe. But it is a tricky thing because in cloud environments, you allow your customers to go in there and really configure the machine however they want. Whereas in the old kind of traditional web hosting, there's a little bit more control by the provider of what software was on there. They didn't really have root access. They could do certain things. But in this space, you can really put whatever you want on there. So that allows you to make a lot of mistakes and leave a lot of vulnerabilities, dumb passwords, whatever. So it is an attractive target for
I think an important aspect of this is I think, and I don't remember exactly the context in which Manny was describing this. I think it was in the context of perhaps infrastructure as a service, but I think it's really important to consider, which is consistent with what you were describing. But I think it's really important, particularly for business enterprises that are purchasing cloud services, is to take a careful look at what this service really provides. That is, if it's infrastructure as a service, that is, you're provided a server platform and you're responsible for putting your application on top of that and then making sure that the security controls for that application are there. That's that's one sort of view of things. And then there are software services as a cloud service, and LinkedIn is a cloud-based service. A lot of our email services are cloud-based services today, and so that's another perspective. And I think it's very important that you understand what you're getting for that in terms of patching services, in terms of even detecting threats, detecting exploits, who's responsible for investigating those kinds of events, and what types of concerns you might have in terms of the data that might be lost and things like that. So I think the infrastructure service industry in general has matured. That is, if you go to a reputable cloud service, they have pretty good controls in place. It's a well understood environment. Some of the services, there still have been some significant breaches over the last year. And I think it depends on perhaps the mindset of the organization that's providing the service. Is it just a sort of an entertainment type thing, and Have they really put in all the checks and balances that need to be there to be able to detect and respond and deal with any types of threats that are, even threatening the service, let alone perhaps compromising it. So I think there's still a lot of maturing that needs to take place. So that's sort of my point of view here. I'm perhaps biasing your grade, but you get to give the first grade here.
Oh, the first grade, and we're going like through an A through F kind of scale?
Yeah, let's do that.
I'll give it a B.
You give it a B?
I'm not
Okay.
good about giving A's out on anything.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm one of those kind of people.
I think last time I was the one who gave the A's out to everyone.
You gave A's out to everybody?
I think so.
Yeah, generous guy. So what do you say here?
Well, I just gave myself an A+ earlier.
You did do that. We weren't even grading it.
But other people only get an A. Stan gets the A+.
Okay, but you have to grade this thing now. Cloud compromises.
Cloud compromises. I don't know if we've seen a significant increase in cloud compromises. I think in terms of compromises, it's been about the same as usual, and it probably doesn't matter what the hosting platform is. I think most of the contributions to the compromise are not specifically, let's say, the cloud. It's usually the protections around it. So I think that's why it's a little hard to track it that way. So I would probably give it a B, like John.
B?
I don't think it's exactly predicted, but there have been compromises, both in the infrastructure as a cloud and the other kind of cloud providers you mentioned. B is fair.
Okay, B.
I guess I'm straying away from my A's.
I maybe I'm a stingy guy here. I'm gonna give it a C. And the reason why, I
like that.
Well, the reason why is because I don't think this has really become a notable issue per se, but I think it is a pertinent thing. It was a pertinent prediction. I think it was one to be able to say that really enterprises need to be paying attention to cloud services, how they're purchasing it, what they're getting for it, what are the patch management processes around it, what are the controls that are in place. So I think it's a very important consideration. I think it was a good consideration then. I think it's a good consideration now. In terms of predicting the issue, I'm not sure if it's been an increase. I think it's actually perhaps been a decrease, at least in the infrastructure industry, that they've gotten better controls around it. Remember 2012, we were dealing with just rampant cases of Joomla and WordPress sites being compromised. I don't know if it's since then, but just I think last week, John, you were talking about how WordPress has automatic update features
that was
associated
last
with it.
week, right, yeah.
Right, and so I see that as an improvement in how cloud services are managed.
Right, or at least some of the software products on top of the cloud, right? The one thing I would say about cloud is I'm a big advocate of it because it allows you to really quickly and easily set up machines and scale quickly.
Big advocate, yeah.
However, it also allows you to make mistakes really quickly too because of that. Whereas in the old days, we had a lot more checks and balances when we would set up a new environment and new hardware. There was a little bit more control around, let's make sure that there's a firewall policy in place. Now with cloud, everybody's boom, fling it up there and let's go.
Bureaucracy is a firewall.
Right.
There you go. Okay, so that's very good. All right, so I think we have a B, and a C here, and so we're going to go to the next one. And like I said, no retribution here for any bad grades. But my forecast was a new emphasis on preventative technology. And so what is really I think I described it as hopeful. That is, I think there's been an awful lot of emphasis around using threat intelligence as basically experience or information about threats that had already occurred, basically attacks that had occurred, and trying to use that to prevent future attacks. I don't think that's been really a very effective approach to things. It might give you some insights into the things that may have already taken place, but I think what really needs to happen is to look at security from a preventative point of view. That is to put controls into place before there's an attack so that the attacks are not successful, as opposed to trying to respond to attacks. So that was my prediction. And Stan, you get to give the first grade here.
I feel like I should give you an A.
I'm going to grade myself. No, you don't have to give me an A.
I might be in the B's. Well, I think that vendors in general would have you believe that they're doing more on the preventative side. So there are more features packed into some of their appliances. But I don't know that every organization has yet adopted the right kind of stance with preventative technologies, or even enabling all of the features from all of the vendors that they kind of subscribe to. So I don't know if it was a prediction of yours. Like you said, I think you were more hopeful that people would do that, and there's certainly, I think, more marketing around it. But I don't know that people are exactly making that part of their. Some are, and I guess some aren't. And so I would say B. That it's a good, hopeful thing, and we should always be striving towards it. And I think in security in general, that's a never-ending life cycle. You're always trying to be preventative, but you never quite get there. So I think B is fair.
Okay, B. What do you say?
I'm probably going to score similarly. For me, especially when you're talking about threat intelligence and some of these threat intelligence marketplaces, I think that space is still maturing. It has not matured yet. I mean, we kind of saw it maybe 2 years ago, really starting to come into its own, a lot of new players coming in and whatnot, but I still don't think it's really taken hold, kind of like what you were saying. People really aren't leveraging it well. But also, a lot of these public or even commercial threat intelligence marketplaces, a lot of their intelligence that they put in there and indicators is generally burned, in my opinion, by the time it's in there.
And by the way, I didn't mean to diminish the value of threat intelligence.
Right, I'm not trying to say that either.
But my point was exactly as you described it better, getting all twisted on words today, but you described it better. That is, the information that's there is basically historical information as opposed to current information. And I think we need to get to a higher level of abstraction in threat intelligence to actually have intelligence. It can't really be data about what, old things that had taken place. So
right.
You're absolutely right.
And I think, this whole process, people are working out the kinks as we go here. And once it really becomes a platform that you can really utilize well, then you might see more things get in there. But again, it's tricky. Once it's in, it's burned in a way. So in the old days, a lot of us kept a lot of our indicators kind of on the QT in very closed communities, very isolated, because we didn't really want the adversary, especially when it's a nation state kind of thing, to know that we know. So, it's a tricky balance there of, especially with some of these commercial marketplaces where you got a lot of participants, if you think that the adversaries aren't also in there, realizing that their infrastructure is now inside these threat intelligence databases, that would be a pretty naive thing to think.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, that's kind of my spin.
And that's one of the big challenges with the information sharing approach to things, is that as the information gets shared, you have to assume that the bad actors, the attackers, are also trying to get that information and then use that to either adapt their attack techniques or tools or the infrastructure that they're using to help subvert the benefit of that shared information. So.
Right, and I'm not trying to say that I'm against the sharing of threat intelligence, because I'm totally all for it. It's just that it's a fine balance that you have to walk with that.
Since we're on this subject, it's a little bit of a tangent, but the book I like best around this topic is Liars and Outliers by Bruce Schneier. And he actually goes into, it's about a couple of years old now, but he goes into why threat intelligence sharing is difficult and how basically we're programmed to be able to have a finite-sized trust group. It's sort of a tribal behavior that I think the magic number was about 124 people or something like that we are capable of trusting in a particular way. And you can overcome those tendencies, but to have a huge trust group really isn't a fathomable thing, because you lose your context of what information you can trust those folks with and who you can even trust in those circumstances. So it's an interesting book. It goes into a lot more detail than obviously that I just described here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grade myself on this.
And I was a B, by the way.
Oh, okay, it was a B, sorry. So we got a B and a B. I'm going to give myself a C. And
you're a tough critic.
Not Tough grader. And here's the reason why. I was hopeful that this would come about. I know we've done some things in terms of preventative things to try to pick up indicators that would be suggestive of a problem before it's occurred, and we've had some good success with that. I haven't really seen it so much in the industry. In fact, what I've been hearing, are things like, applying new technology like machine learning to try to block threats. And what I think really needs to happen is to kind of reverse that trend. That is to use machine learning to observe normal behavior of things, put the controls in place based on expected observed behaviors, and then use that as a means to make the attacks, just basically unsuccessful. If we have to wait for the threat actor to do something, and then we're trying to react to it, it requires a lot more real-time processing. There are a lot of technical challenges around that, and quite frankly, you can't learn about something that you can't see. You can observe how an application is behaving normally. You can't observe how a threat actor is going to do something. So I don't see how machine learning is going to be effective at doing that. So I'm hopeful, and there actually are companies that are working in this direction. I haven't done any detailed evaluation on that yet, but there definitely are companies working in this direction, and I think it's the way it needs to go. So perhaps I was a year ahead in the prediction. We'll see. So we're going to have to get our grade point average up here.
It doesn't bode well for the next one for me.
Okay, so Matt's forecast, it was the year of point of sale malware. And so I guess it's your turn to go, or should I go first here?
You can go first, sure.
Go first. I'll tell you what, it's still definitely out there. I think the shock trauma of the news reports had basically come and gone associated with point-of-sale malware, but I think it's still kind of rampant. And what kind of the interesting thing, and I think I have to credit Todd Vascalis on this, and he's going to be participating with us on our prediction show, but one of the things he had mentioned is that, the tendency is for people to go walk up to a register or whatever to use their credit card, swipe the card, and then have the person running, oh no, you have to stick your card in the machine. And it turns out that if you swipe the card, and that machine that reader has been compromised, you've already been had. The chip and pin isn't going to help you at that point.
Right.
The chip's not going to help you at that point. And so the better practice would be to walk up, as most people stick it in there and have them tell you, no, you have to swipe it or something like that. But there's still significant transition that needs to be made to protect against this. There have been a lot of attacks going on in the background. They still are pretty rampant. They just haven't made the news.
Yeah, and I don't think, from a newsworthiness, I don't think we've seen any major, or at least nobody's reported as major ones as like the Target incident and whatnot from years past, in terms of like a wide scale point of sale type incident. But we know, Stan and I did a little pet project last year looking at some point of sale stuff, and there are definitely infections out there, and there's credit cards streaming across all day, every day, continuously, as these infected, people are using these infected devices at a lot of, little local retail stores and things of that nature. So,
yeah, there haven't really been the big headline news items.
Yeah, it's more smaller stores and whatnot that at least I think we've seen.
Okay.
I'm giving it a C.
I was going to go with a C as well. What do you think, Stan?
Well, I feel like we have to give two grades. One for is it still happening, and the other for the newsworthiness of it. So for the newsworthiness, that's a C. But I think because it's still happening in the background and it's ongoing, and we should still pay attention to it, I think B. But we haven't. It's not an A because it hasn't made that big splash, and people aren't really excited about it. It seems like only when people are excited about something does action taken against it. So maybe some action's already been taken against it, right?
Well, it's actually a good point. If it doesn't make a splash, it doesn't make the news, then it doesn't get the same kind of reaction that perhaps is really needed. And I think that's one of the real subtleties in these predictions, is there's that sort of sweet spot, in a sense, that is, if it becomes a really big issue, the tendency is there's a response around it, and it tends to fix things and damper the issue.
Right.
And then the other thing, sometimes they just don't pan out. And so there's that in-between space when you're looking at predictions that is what things are going to kind of fly under the radar and keep going. So I think you're convincing me that this is one that's actually kind of a B because it's still going on, hasn't made the headlines. They've kind of kept it under the radar, and it continues on.
Yeah, and there's also been, there's been a shift in the way people bank as well. A lot of mobile banking and a lot of mobile payments. So I think there's something to pay attention to even in next year as people try to figure out how to hack those systems. I know several talks this year given at various conferences, where they try to attack these systems. And, so it's definitely still going and probably evolving.
Okay. So what grade did you give?
B.
A B?
B and
okay.
C for newsworthiness.
You convinced me to upgrade it to a B.
So I think we're doing pretty well. BBC
doing pretty well.
Or stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
now
Matt's done the best so far.
No, I think about the same because
no, yeah, you're right.
We're
you're
all
right.
the same.
Right,
We're
yeah.
all. But I think last year, Brian, you said that getting a low grade is actually good. Because we were predicting, these terrible things. So if you get an A, that's horrible. Getting a lower grade is good.
Okay, so the nice segue for the next piece here, because one of the things we talked about were DDoS trends for 2016, and I think we get a good grade for that one.
Yeah, it's an A+ or something, right?
So was
Yeah,
there
and a little
prediction
extra
made
credit,
around
I
this?
think.
Because I don't remember.
Yeah, I think we had made basically a prediction that this was going to continue to get worse, and it was somewhat based on the IoT things that we had been kind of tracking for about a year at that point, and that really went kind of, sort of ballistic
off the rails.
in a sense. Yeah, absolutely. So, and then the next item that we had, and these weren't any particular person's predictions, so we'll just kind of discuss them here and not grade them. But the other one that we had talked about was destructive malware. Now, the way I define destructive malware is, the term was kind of coined around the notion of what had happened to Sony Pictures, where there was a targeted attack against the organization. They got inside, distributed malware around to devices and used that to kind of wipe out infrastructure. And I think about 30,000 computers or along those lines had been impacted by this. And although not really destructive, there definitely have been a lot of events over the course of the year. Maybe not big organizations like Sony Pictures, ones that don't that stick out. But this is another case where it's been sort of on the edge of the headline news. There were some cases where some hospitals had been targeted by this sort of thing, and then more recently, John, you just covered a story where the San Francisco
municipal rail service, right, had, and I guess that same actor, there were a lot of like construction companies and other things. It's kind of interesting because the actor behind that, they kind of figured out in their head what is the sweet spot monetarily that they'll probably pay, because if you ask for $100,000, I'm not doing that. But if you ask for like $5,000, $10,000, they seem to figure out what that marketplace will bear in terms of, not to say that I'm happy about that, but it's interesting, I guess, that
they're trying to make it sort of a no-brainer decision where you're in the face of perhaps millions of dollars of impact to the business, but you're paying an extortion.
Right.
And so, they'll, ask for $10,000 compared to millions of dollars of damage. So you really have to stand by your principles if you're not going to pay that extortion threat.
And we've talked about some of these, like these actors who target some of the smaller things, like San Francisco Municipal Rail, probably not a small entity, but some of these other ones were definitely smaller entities where they're not going to have, probably good security practices around their small company. They're also, the financial impact is probably too small to get reasonable law enforcement assistance or attention around it. So it's, it's an interesting, you get a whole bunch of little ones and you can get a decent amount of money as opposed to one big fish and try to extort a big bunch of money out, which you're probably not going to be successful at anyway.
Right.
Because they have more resources to bear to deal with the problem, or better even security practices, better backup practices, blah, blah, blah.
This is absolutely true. And this is consistent with the types of behavior that have been seen in bank fraud.
Right.
Or trying to steal credentials and gain access to a business bank account. The tendency is to go toward the medium-sized business. My theory on this is that they don't want to go after the large organizations that might have a strong legal team, might get the attention of law enforcement, more excited, so to speak, to investigate it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, and at least in the bank fraud space, going after consumers isn't very lucrative, partly because, at least in bank fraud, the bank is actually liable for the fraud as opposed to the business. And so when they're a customer of a large bank, the bank might go after the criminals in that case, and the consumers are, kind of protected. So it's a situation where the attackers are not, they're making deliberate decisions about who they're going after. All right. Any other thoughts?
And threatening to destroy things if they don't get their money, which is not good.
This is true.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. Final thoughts, John? Let's work here. We're about a B- in terms of the grade here, but that's not bad. That's not bad.
That's not bad. We'll probably. I guess my final thought would be, since I'm on the prediction show that we're going to have, next week, that will definitely be raising the average score because I'm participating.
Okay, so you're already giving yourself a good
I'm already
grade.
giving myself an A for next year when we review, or whoever reviews. Maybe it'll be Matt and Danny next year.
So between my A+ for reverse engineering and your A for predictions, it's going to be wonderful.
All right, very good. So that's our show for today, and thank you for joining us. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at attthreattrack@list.att.com. If you have your own predictions, please share those with us. And if you have your own thoughts about the predictions that we just discussed here from last year, we're certainly interested in those thoughts as well. You can find AT&T ThreatTraq on the AT&T Tech channel. It's on YouTube as well as on iTunes. And you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @ATTBusiness. So thank you, Stan, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. I'm Brian Rexroad. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Until then, keep your network safe.